Why do we always compare? Comparing is a natural function of the human mind. We understand the world through contrast and evaluation, small and large, better and worse, faster and slower. The brain requires benchmarks for decision-making, and comparison provides those benchmarks. It helps us determine our position among others and along the trajectory of our own lives. Without comparison, evaluating progress, setting goals, and even defining success would be difficult. The issue begins when comparison shifts from being a cognitive tool to becoming a measure of self-worth. In that state, we evaluate ourselves not on the basis of personal growth, but in relation to the achievements of others. This type of comparison is often accompanied by feelings of inadequacy, envy, or anxiety, because there is always someone who appears more advanced, more accomplished, or more successful. The roots of this behavior can be traced to the human need for belonging and social acceptance. We want reassurance. Are we good enough? Are we on the right path? Social media platforms, with their constant display of curated success, intensify this tendency and transform comparison from an internal cognitive process into a daily habit. Yet comparison, when conscious and intentional, can function as a catalyst for growth. When it serves as inspiration rather than unhealthy rivalry, it becomes a mechanism for development. The critical point is to make our primary benchmark the previous version of ourselves, rather than the lives and trajectories of others. From a sociological perspective, comparison is not merely an individual or psychological behavior, it is deeply embedded in social structures. Human beings do not live in isolation. Identity is formed through interaction. We come to know ourselves through the other. Class, position, level of education, lifestyle, income, appearance, and even taste acquire meaning within networks of social relations. Comparison, therefore, becomes a mechanism for understanding one's social position. In social comparison theory, developed by Leon Festinger, individuals are understood to evaluate their abilities and opinions by referencing others. When objective standards are absent, society becomes a mirror. Through this mirror, we measure ourselves. In modern societies, this process intensifies because lifestyles and opportunities are more diverse and visible. Structurally, comparison is closely tied to social inequality. In societies marked by pronounced class divisions, individuals constantly encounter visible symbols of wealth, power, and status. Media and advertising further construct models of success that appear universal but are not equally accessible. This dynamic can generate relative deprivation, a sense of lack that arises not from absolute poverty, but from comparison with others.
Thinkers such as Pierre Bourdieu demonstrate that capital is not merely economic. Cultural capital, education, taste, linguistic competence, and social capital networks and connections also shape distinction. Preferences, manners of speech, clothing styles, and artistic choices operate as markers of differentiation. Comparison in this context contributes to the reproduction of power structures, as in David Whale's attempt to approximate dominant models. In contemporary society, digital social networks have amplified this process. Comparison is no longer limited.
Dear friends, please don't forget to like, share, and comment.
To neighbors or colleagues. It operates on a global scale. Individuals measure themselves against curated and edited versions of others' lives. This can create normative pressure, perceived obligation to meet standards that are often more performative than authentic. From a critical sociological angle, comparison operates within the broader process known as the social construction of reality. Values, norms, and definitions of success are not natural or fixed. They are produced and stabilized with within institutions and everyday interactions. Family, school, the labor market, and media each generate standards by which individuals evaluate themselves. A child exposed early to grades, rankings, and numerical assessments learns that worth is measurable and comparable. Educational institutions play a particularly central role. Modern educational systems are built upon competition, ranking, and selection. Comparison is not incidental. It is integral to their internal logic. Report cards, standardized tests, and competitive admissions processes subject students to continuous relative evaluation. Over time, these mechanisms produce the internalisation of external standards. Even in the absence of formal assessment, individuals continue to measure themselves against others. From the standpoint of social identity theory, developed by Henry Tocqueville, comparison also functions at the group level. Individuals define themselves not only as persons, but as members of groups ethnic, national, gendered, professional, or generational. The comparison between us and them strengthens in group cohesion, yet it can also foster prejudice, exclusion, or conflict. At a macro level, modernity with its emphasis on individualism and social mobility renders comparison more pervasive. In traditional societies, positions were relatively fixed. In modern societies, the promise of upward mobility compels individuals to constantly assess their standing. This dynamic simultaneously fuels hope for advancement and anxiety about falling behind. Sociologist Erving Goffman conceptualized social life as a form of performance. Individuals present curated versions of themselves in everyday interactions and monitor the reactions of others. Within this dramaturgical framework, comparison becomes part of impression management. Was our performance as convincing or successful as that of others? Social media intensifies this theatrical dimension by enabling selective self-presentation and continuous observation. From a political economic perspective, market logic has extended beyond economic domains into everyday life. Quantification, indexing, and ranking have become normalized tools of evaluation, from university standings and corporate performance metrics to follower counts on digital platforms. When nearly everything can be expressed numerically, comparison becomes faster, more expansive, and more habitual. Individuals are assessed not only by income, but also by visibility, popularity, and productivity. Comparison also serves a regulatory function. Observing social rewards and sanctions, individuals adjust their behavior accordingly. What is praised tends to be reproduced. What is ignored or devalued recedes. In this way, comparison becomes an instrument for maintaining or transforming norms. Social order is guided not solely through direct coercion, but through these subtle evaluated processes. At the same time, comparison can generate critical consciousness. When one group compares its conditions to those of another and recognizes inequality, collective demands may emerge. Many social movements have originated in such experiences of unequal comparison moments when the gap between what is and what could be becomes visible. Comparison, then, is a multi-layered phenomenon, a cognitive instrument, a mechanism of identity formation, a product of structural inequality, and a component of modern institutional logic. Understanding it requires simultaneous attention to individual psychology, power structures, social institutions, and dominant cultural frameworks.